the point of social media, you had a tweet that you did that went viral that got attacked, right? I mean, there was one in particular that I think was attacked more than the others. I can't even remember it off the top of my head.
It's never my intent
Yeah.
to post a tweet that gets attacked.
Of course not.
If it gets attacked, it's like, I didn't see that coming. I count myself as an educator among the ranks of educators, and my goal is to enlighten and educate, not to anger people. So I still maintain a forbidden Twitter file on my computer. These are tweets that, no, I'm not going to post it, even though it's true, objectively true. It would be too upsetting to people. Is there another way? So anytime that happens, like, oh my gosh, okay, let me see if I can tune that differently next time.
But if you know it's true and you believe it's important, you still might not post it because it might upset people.
In ways that are not productive.
Give me an example.
No, I will quote my father.
Okay.
It's not good enough to be right. You also have to be effective. If you're not effective, go home. Doesn't matter if you are in the right. So if I post something that just creates more divisiveness, I need to find another way to achieve the same goal without the conflict. So no, I'm not just about put the truth out there, and if it triggers landmines, so what? It's the truth. No, that's not being an educator.
There's a point here I really want to answer for my own, something I've been thinking a lot about. As we see this polarization in every facet of conversation and public discourse, I've started to think that maybe the antidote is the very few amongst us that have the guts to stand by the truth regardless of the arrows they take. And I'm seeing that a little bit with some big commentators. I shan't name names because that'll be a headline. But I'm thinking actually their bravery, I guess, and their courage to say the truth regardless of the fact they're going to get piled on because it doesn't fit the narrative is actually helping us. It's helping us almost, it's helping.
It moves the needle a little.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see that. I'm just saying, I believe, however delusionally, that you can achieve the same goal without angering people. And part of the goal of that book is to offer ways to think about points of conflict in fresh ways that do not trigger people to dig their heels in and fight more ferociously to defend their opinions. Now, I want to put this in context because I started out by describing an idea, and you're going to say, well, did you consider both sides? No, I considered all sides. People want to think we're in the most violent times. Can we look at the violence against the trans community? First, there was always violence against trans people. Nobody was talking about it because there was violence against other people. There was violence against black people. There was violence against women. There's a whole list of people who were more represented statistically in the world than trans people, where we went through periods of our social justice arc to try to rectify those problems. And so the fact that trans rights are on the table now is itself a measure of progress. Because we're not talking about gay marriage anymore. We're not talking under President Clinton, one of our more progressive liberal presidents. Do you know what the thing was? It was gays in the military. Don't ask, don't tell. That was considered a progressive stance in the 1990s under a liberal president. Don't ask, don't tell. Now in Qatar, they say we will welcome gay people, but don't exhibit the gayness in the stands. And everyone is jumping all over them for that regressive posture. It's exactly what we were 30 years ago. Don't ask, don't tell. I don't mind if you're gay, just don't kiss another man in front of me if you're a man. Otherwise, okay with it, all right? So what I'm saying is, look at the other things that preceded it, and you can declare progress having led up to it. That's my point. Not that it's still, still have to worry about it, and it still needs solutions. And you still have to somehow change people's sense of what equality is and equal access and opportunity and equity and inclusion. That all still needs to happen. But that is not happening now, or less so with black people. So there are measures of progress that are kind of perverse, but real. And you know what my father used to say? He said, I'll know we've achieved equality when a black person can be indicted for embezzlement of funds. When a black person can be sent to jail for embezzling $500 million, I know we've made it. Okay. Okay. Like I said, it's a perverse measure, but it's another way to think about the progress that has actually happened in this world. All I'm saying is we may be living in some of the safest times there ever was in the history of civilization. I don't think we should lose sight of that. People are afraid to say it, I think, because the worry, and it's a legitimate worry, that you might just get complacent and sit back and say, see, everything is fine. It requires no more work and no more effort. I'm saying maybe we should pay, in addition to worrying about the violence that persists to this day, we should look at the successes and say, well, what did we do right? Let's do more of that. And there's not much of people saying, look how far we've come. Let's list how we achieved this.
Why don't people do that? Why don't they? I saw a poll on Twitter 2 days ago, and the question was, it was essentially, do you feel optimistic about the future? I clicked yes, and I was in the tiny minority, and roughly 70% of people, I think it was slightly more, felt pessimistic about the future. Either were worried and fearful about the future.
Right, and here's another statistic, which is in the spirit of that, but it's a little more thorough. It was a Gallup poll, one of I forgot which one, it might have been a different one, but one of the official polling agencies for the past 30 years have asked people each year in the United States, are things more dangerous for you just in your community, in your this year than last year? 27 of those years, people said it's more dangerous this year than last year. I don't feel as safe as I did last year. Okay? Now, let's plot the crime rate over the past 30 years. It has been a precipitous drop. Just drop. There's some bumps in there, but basically it has dropped for 30 years since basically the 1980s, 90s up until today. So there's some delusional force operating on people's understanding of the world in which they live. And then people wanted to blame it, I think in part correctly, on local news. What's the first thing you see? You put on, not the national, the local news. There's a crime committed, and now we have video. So, we didn't used to have surveillance video. Now you see the person beating up on the old person or the person breaking into the jewelry. Now you see it. You say, oh my gosh. Clutch your loved ones and your valuables. Our ability to show you violence is greater than ever before, and it affects us emotionally. Part of what it is to be a scientist is to figure out all the ways you could bias yourself and remove them as far as possible, as much as you can. What is the scientific method? If not, I give my own wording of the scientific method. It's simply do whatever it takes to not fool yourself into thinking something is true that is not, or that something is not true that is. So that poll would have told me, I'm going to look at the actual data. And I'm going to look at and I'm going to react to the actual data, not to my feelings about an objective truth. Nothing wrong with feelings. It's the source of the greatest art in the world. And it's our emotions, how we feel for people. But if you're going to make legislation, if you're going to act on your feelings, and there's an objective truth that informs those feelings, That's the path you should take. Otherwise, we're a house of cards that could collapse at any moment because somebody feels like you're going to harm them, or they feel like it's dangerous, or they feel like excuse me? I love human feelings, but don't let it interfere with objective truths. Don't let it interfere with legislation, laws that would have to affect us all.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.